Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs to open things up here for the AFC West, as they have won the division for, let's see, 8 billion times in a row, it feels like. The Kansas City Chiefs have just been on top of this division. When you look at what they did last year, 15-2 overall record, obviously on their way to the Super Bowl. Came one game short of three-peating there. You see that offensive grade, they were 14th in the NFL. Defensive grade, though, we're going to get into that more here into this show. When people think about the Kansas City Chiefs, they think about Andy Reid, they think about Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, the offense, but it has been the defense that was really the anchor for them last year and allowed them to get back to the Super Bowl. We've got their projected win total for this upcoming season at 10-8. So obviously double digits, still a good score, not quite 15, but Dalton, I think if you go back and you look at some of those games that we saw last year, everybody freaks out about the word lucky. Everybody freaks out about the word lucky, but there is a little bit of luck that's involved. You can't say that the margin for error is so small in this league and yet not admit there's a little bit of luck involved. It felt like the Chiefs also, with the talent, the preparation, everything that they do so well, also had a little bit of luck on their side to get to 15 last year. We've got that mark around 10.8 for this year. What do you think about the Kansas City Chiefs, just overall, before we dive into some of the biggest strengths, biggest weaknesses, and some stars on that team?
I mean, look, for as much as everybody's looking for the big weakness and the big flaw that's finally going to take them out this year, it's the offensive line. They're thin on the defensive line. Is it the receivers and the questions surrounding that? And at the end of the day, if they have Andy Reid, if they have Patrick Mahomes, it's the same way it used to be with Belichick and Brady. They're probably going to win the division. They're going to win a lot of close games because they're the best situational football team in the league. They've got an excellent defense with Steve Spagnuolo. And look, is there a little bit of luck in a handful of those games? Sure, but they also make their own luck when you talk about forcing timely turnovers and Mahomes playing well in the fourth quarter and blocked field goals, and all three phases matter. Look, the stat that sticks out more than anything else, Trevor, last year is that including the playoffs, they were 12-0 in one-score games. Honestly, that's not an accident. They've been doing that forever. Patrick Mahomes has a winning record in his career with a deficit. I mean, they just know how to stay in football games. I think it's so much the way that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady used to do it. Just give them a shot in the last 5 minutes, and they're going to find a way situationally to pull it out. So the Chiefs, look, for as much as everybody's waiting for the downfall, it's not going to happen for quite a while.
Yeah, I would not say downfall. Downfall is absolutely not the word that I would use. But as we go throughout this show, I will say the division around them does seem better. So where it felt like, okay, maybe, you're playing your divisional opponents 6 total times, you can pencil the Chiefs in for maybe 5-1. Maybe you're not doing that this year. We'll get to those teams in a second, though. Let's talk about the biggest strength on this team. You've done a great job over at PFF.com, really encompassing these previews yourself, penning a lot of kind of what we're talking about here on these shows. We're going to talk about biggest strength, biggest weakness for this team, but let's start on the positive, the biggest strength. You say that it's the defensive side of the ball. And of course, when you got a guy like Chris Jones, when you got a guy like Trent McDuffie, when you got Steve Spagnuolo as your defense coordinator, you're in for a pretty good season on that side of the ball. Are you as confident on that side of the ball as you were for them maybe last year, being one of the top 3 defenses in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, they managed to retain Nick Bolton. The only real, veteran guy they lost was Justin Reed. I think they're not that they're not that deep on the defensive line. So if something were to happen to Chris Jones, then I would really start to question, especially their pass rush. But look, they were the second highest graded defense in football last year behind Philadelphia, right? And I think when you talk about all those one-score games and people talk about the luck and Patrick Mahomes and all the refs and everything else, people forget to stay in those games. They have to be able to make stops in big moments, and they do it over and over and over. You even look in the postseason, their defense won them that playoff game against Houston, and they got the stop when they needed against Buffalo. This team only gave up 30 points 3 times last season, and one of them was the Week 18 game against the Broncos where they didn't even play their starters, and those are the only 3 games they lost all year. Otherwise, when you know your defense is going to make stops, when you know they're going to give up 24 or less, when you know Chris Jones in obvious passing situations is the best defensive tackle in football, and you have Trent McDuffie and Nick Bolton, and then so many young players, Leo Chenal, Shamari Connor, Jalen Watson, Josh Williams. I mean, just guys all over the place that make plays when it matters most. And then the best defensive play caller in the NFL, and Steve Spagnuolo. I just think, again, we look at this team, we have so many more questions about their offense than their defense. I think their defense is going to be a rock-solid unit once again this year.
Yeah, and I love the rookies that they were able to bring in. Brett Veach does such a great job. Their general manager identifying talent. And it's a lot of players that I'm pretty high on. I feel like Noel Williams for them is the exact type of corner that they want as somebody who has that size, speed, ball skills type of combination. Of course, any team in the NFL would love that, but that aggressive mentality towards the ball, I feel like this defense specifically really emphasizes. And then I like Jeffrey Bossa sort of as that hybrid safety linebacker, second level defender type of a player. He's a little bit lighter, so you don't want him in the box a ton, but man, he can fly down and make some tackles for you, and he gives you that extra speed. On the defensive line, you talked about some of the veterans that they lost this offseason, but Omar Norman Lott, you're probably tired of me hearing it. He was one of my guys in last year's draft. He's somebody who makes a major difference. And you talk about if a Chris Jones were to go down, man, Omar Norman Lott getting to learn behind Chris Jones for the next year or two, I think is going to be something that could be a deadly combination with him getting to play next to him and behind him over the next couple of years, just because he has a similar skill set with that explosiveness as a pass rusher to him. And then Ashton Gelati, I think that powerful base defensive end is somebody that this defense really likes as well. So maybe not the veteran depth, but they do have some rookies that you really get excited about. Biggest weakness on this team, you said it's the offensive line still. You're losing a couple of guys, most notably Joe Thuney, who is no longer on the team. And man, you were singing Joe Thuney's praises last season and how even with him being known as one of the best guards in the NFL, just not getting the recognition that he still deserves for being able to kick out to offensive tackle. And him really, it felt like that move saved the season, right? Because if he doesn't have the ability to kick out to offensive tackle, who are they playing? I mean, I don't even know if they get to the Super Bowl without Joe Thuney's ability and versatility to get out to that offensive tackle spot. He's no longer on the team. So Josh Simmons is the guy now that they're hoping can step in at left tackle. They're hoping that Kingsley Suamataia can play at one of those guard spots. But how do you feel about this offensive line with Joe Thuney no longer there?
I mean, you feel a little shaky about it, right? Because I know Josh Simmons has looked pretty good in the preseason, right? And he's going to take that left tackle job. But you look at left guard where Thuney's really vacating, and Joe Thuney was the highest graded pass blocking guard in the NFL since he joined Kansas City. That's not a small loss you're talking about. And then at right tackle, there's a lot of questions about, is it Jawan Taylor? Is it Jalen Moore that's going to play on that right side? What are they doing at right tackle also? So I've got two spots where I'm really questioning who is going to start there. And then a third one at left tackle and Josh Simmons where, I know a lot of people like him. He is talented. He's athletic. But it is going to take some time in the regular season for him to get acclimated. So there's really only two guys I feel great about right now on the offensive line. That's Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith at center and right guard. And we know when this Chiefs team has struggled, particularly in 2 Super Bowls, they have not been able to pass protect. And if that's going to be the case again this year, even the great Patrick Mahomes is not going to be able to always work around it against a great pass rush across from him. So I think this offensive line, everybody knows it. This is the unit that everybody's going to be watching this year. I do think with Rashee Rice healthy, although he's going to miss some amount of time with a suspension, their receiving core is going to be better. You get year 2 of Xavier Worthy, right? I think you've got some guys, especially maybe even Brashard Smith out of the backfield, the 7th round pick who can catch some passes. But this offensive line is going to be the unit that everybody's watching this year, and it's because we have 3 spots where you really don't know what you're getting this season.
Yeah, we'll bounce around a little bit on the show sheet. We were going to talk about quarterback next, but I want to stick along the offensive line for conversation's sake. For their offensive player that you wanted to kind of shine a spotlight on, you have Creed Humphrey, who obviously Creed Humphrey is also a major part of why the Kansas City Chiefs were so great at pass protecting over the last couple of years, along with Joe Thuney. I just did the 2021 redraft article over at PFF.com, and in doing so, Creed Humphrey was in that draft. He ended up getting picked in the 2nd round. Think about how talented that draft class is, Dalton. There's only 2 players in that entire draft that have a higher wins above average cumulative score since 2021 than Creed Humphrey. The only 2 are Micah Parsons and Patrick Surtain. Creed Humphrey is the next player, which is incredible to say, I mean, for a center. And to be honest, with the other studs that are in that 2021 class. I mean, Jamar Chase is in that class. Rayshawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw. Like, there's just so many incredible players that were in that class. And yet Creed Humphrey still has been able to be incredibly valuable at that center position. So talking about Creed Humphrey and how that should quell some nervousness that Chiefs fans might have along their offensive line with all the changes.
I mean, straight up, he's the best center in football, and it's not even close, especially now that Frank Ragnow retired from the Lions. He's the best center in football. Last year, among centers to play 300 snaps, he had the best PFF grade by 6 points. I mean, it's just what you see from him all the way around. Dominance in the run game. Pass protection is elite. Him and Jordan Mailata last year were the only two offensive linemen in the league with at least a 90 pass blocking and run blocking grade. And I think through only 4 years of his career, if I remember looking at the 20-year history of PFF, he's already like the 6th or 7th highest graded center in PFF history in just 4 years. I mean, you're talking, up there with guys like Jason Kelsey, like Nick Mangold, like Chris Myers. This is how good a track this guy is on through 4 seasons of his career. He is the constant. He's the best center in football. He should be there for as long as they'll have him, because he's honestly 4 years into his career, he's already putting together an early Hall of Fame track record. I know it's early with that, but I mean, Creed Humphrey, there may not be a player who is more clearly the best player at his position in the NFL right now than Creed Humphrey. I think the only other one, maybe, Max has brought this up, is maybe Fred Warner. Maybe, because he's pretty clearly the best linebacker in football. But yeah. I don't think there's a wider gap between the best player and everybody else than at center with Creed Humphrey. That's how good he is.
I think that's it, right? I think it's just Fred Warner. That's a really good question, but I think Fred Warner is probably the only answer there. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes. A lot of people in the chat here on the show are talking about Patrick Mahomes. They're talking about Travis Kelce. It's what a lot of people want to talk about with the Kansas City Chiefs going into this season. Patrick Mahomes' PFF passing grade last season, 84.1. You have highlighted the key stat, and I'm glad that you did, because this is where I wanted the conversation to go. 7.0 average depth of target last year. I was tied for 41st out of 44 qualifying quarterbacks, and it just felt like that was the missing piece for this Chiefs offense. And to be honest, it's why they had the number 2 defense in the NFL, according to our grades, and yet they were still in all of these one-score games, even with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and what should be an explosive offense. It wasn't very explosive in the passing game. So they've made some additions this year, right? You have Hollywood Brown. You've got Xavier Worthy, obviously. You've got Rashee Rice coming back. It just feels like they have very much leaned into being more of an explosive team. How do you feel about the additions that they have made? Do you think that that's the way that they're going? And do you think it will be successful this upcoming season?
No, I think, you look at when Rashee Rice got hurt last year, and it really killed the explosive element of their passing game, especially with Travis Kelce slowing down a bit now, right? And they couldn't really get Worthy unlocked deep down the field, so they started using him as more of a yards after catch option, which did work. It worked late in the season. Worthy got a lot better late in the season when they just got him the ball on screens and things behind the line of scrimmage, and just let the speed eat on the outside. But this has been the case for 3 years with the Chiefs, is that ever since they traded Tyreek Hill, and look, it's a great trade. I'm sure they do it again. They got Trent McDuffie out of it, right? But they haven't been the explosive downfield passing team. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And last year, one of the issues, too, was that I believe they were dead last in the league in explosive run rate also. I think, I heard Ben Lindsay, our betting analyst, put this the best, is that when they have 3rd and 4, they get 5. When they have 3rd and 7, they get 8. They do just enough to keep the chains moving. They win time of possession. This was a ball control offense last year, right? And I think when you talk about them trying to open things up, they're going to need to, because it opens things up for the run game as well. You get Rice back. Maybe you get Worthy working down the field a little bit more. Hollywood Brown's obviously got great speed. But this is really how it's been for 3 years. 7-yard average depth of target, like you mentioned last year, 4th lowest in football. The lowest big-time throw rate of Patrick Mahomes' career, and he's winning a lot more with his legs. He had the 7th best rushing grade of any quarterback in the league last year. So they get in these tight, close to the vest situations, and they get first downs. That's what they do. That's their goal. At least that was their goal last year. They're trying to open it up more this year. I'm sure they'd love to chuck the ball 60 yards downfield with Mahomes' arm talent, but the last 3 years it has been death by 1,000 paper cuts. Give Mahomes credit, because he's made 3 Super Bowls in a row and won 2 of them doing that, and that's often against these too high looks and these zone defenses how you need to do it. But I think there is an element where they're trying to add more explosiveness to this offense, both through the air and on the ground.
I think that a lot of people are ready for the Patrick Mahomes era to be over. And well, one, it's not. Two, I would say that you did a good job pointing out why Mahomes' season last year, when you think of the context that was involved in everything, it was still a very, very impressive season. Now, was he the elite passer every single week? Was it a ton of big time throws every single week? No, it wasn't. But like you mentioned, that wasn't the offense that they had. That wasn't the weapons that they had at their disposal. This was not the Tyreek Hill prime Travis Kelce years where they're throwing it all over the field against single high coverages. It's a different era in the NFL. There's multiple years removed from that. And like you mentioned, they didn't have Rashee Rice last year. Xavier Worthy wasn't the reliable deep threat receiver that they wanted him to be. So what did Patrick Mahomes need to do instead? Well, he needed to make things work with his legs, which you mentioned he absolutely did. And I'm looking at this too. Avoids negatives. We have that category in there. Avoiding negative plays. Patrick Mahomes, 96th percentile last year. He knew, for as much as coaches will emphasize every single year, win the turnover battle. We got to avoid negatives, all this kind of stuff. You want to do that at all times. Mahomes realized, I have to do that with more emphasis than I ever have before, than most quarterbacks do, because the margin for error for him was so thin. And for them to win 15 games still, with the least amount of explosives and the lowest big time throws that he's had, it was incredibly impressive. And like I said at the beginning, is there a little bit of luck involved? Yes, I think there always is with this game when you're playing it, certainly at an even level and in the pros. But like you mentioned, you've got to put yourself in the right situations to be able to capitalize on a little bit of luck when you get it. I think Patrick Mahomes was a big part of that. Also, as much as I love to give Ben Lindsay credit, and we're going to talk about Ben Lindsay here right in a second, what you said there about, the quote of, hey, whenever any time that the Chiefs need 4, they get 5. Whenever they need 7, they get 8. That was the one and only Seth Galina who said that. So I had to give Seth a shout out.
Ben and Seth often work together, but I know we've talked about this. We've talked about this a lot. But the two of them, they're both brilliant guys, man.
They are the Bash brothers of broadcasting, helping out a lot of the broadcast booth guys do what they do with the PFF data that we get to give a lot of those guys. So just shout out to both those guys, Ben and Seth. But speaking of Ben, we have a best season-long bet from Ben Lindsay that we have here for every team that we're going to be talking about. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, he has Travis Kelce under 700.5, so basically under 700 receiving yards on the season. At DraftKings, this is minus 105. So he says the PFF's projection has 615 yards, assuming Travis Kelce plays all 17 games, which comes in comfortably below the line of 700 receiving yards. Kelce's PFF receiving grade and yardage output has dropped in each of the last 3 seasons, and it's reasonable to expect that that will continue in a season where he will turn 36 years old. Kansas City could also potentially limit his snaps more in the regular season to make sure he might be a little bit more fresh when they get into the postseason, as they are expecting to get into the postseason. What do you think about that? Travis Kelce below 700 yards in a single season. Has that happened for him? Like, it's got to be like first time, like since rookie season. I don't know if you have those numbers up in front of you. I will look them up in a second if you don't have them there, but I cannot think of the last time that Travis Kelce would have had less than 700 yards, but this is sort of that time, right? Again, like he's 36 years old. Father time kind of comes for everybody. And I think that even the people in the chat earlier in the show were kind of pointing out, yeah, you kind of took a step back a little bit last year. So what do you think about that line for Travis Kelce?
Travis Kelce in the regular season has never even been below 800 yards. So if you're
first time ever.
If you're going below 700 here, then you're really counting on, okay, the drop-off is there, and he's pretty much getting to the end here, which the only thing I'll say is if he plays all 17 games, last year, obviously, it's always a thing, Week 18 with the Chiefs, if they need to play or not, but if he plays all 17 games, that's just over 40 yards a game, right? I mean, you would think as much as they still you would think target him, that would still be attainable, but, I mean, how many times did he have below that? It's really... That's a tough one. That's a tough one because you still feel like that's Travis Kelce, and there's certain matchups he's going to succeed. And if he can't get a little over 40 yards a game, then yeah, this might be it this year. But he's never even been below 800. So if you're believing in the under, and it seems like Ben does, then you're thinking he's really just kind of shot. And last year was really a steep decline, and we're going to get another steep decline this year. That's a tough one. That's going to be a hard one. It's going to depend on how much they really emphasize targeting these receivers as opposed to so many years where Kelce was the most targeted player on this team.
So he had over 800 receiving yards last year. Only played in 16 games because he was inactive that last week of the season because they didn't need him. he actually had less than 40 yards receiving in 7 of the 16 games. So almost half of his games.
And he still had 131 targets last year, which you're hoping with Rashee Rice. I mean, that's a silly number for a tight end in 16 games. I think that's probably, if I were guessing, that's probably second behind Brock Bowers, I assume. I have to look at that. I think Bowers had more.
That is still a lot of targets.
I mean, 131. If you can't get 700 yards on 131 targets, it was third behind Bowers, and Trey McBride actually at 139. That's impressive. But, I mean, if he's still going to be
McBride a lot.
If he's still going to be top 5 or 6 in the league among tight ends in targets, then it might be tough. This is a close one because, again, I think if you're taking the under, you're really taking the storyline of like, okay, this guy's about done here.